All right. Good evening and welcome to another episode of the RK Leadership Podcast, where we empower tomorrow's leaders through the sharing of knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Rob Cameronpour, and my very special guest tonight is Garrett Delph. And Garrett is the founder and CEO of Clarity Ops. Before I pass it on to him to do a further introduction of himself, I'd like to take this minute to thank you so much, Garrett, for being with me today and willing to share your story and your inspirational stories with us and with the audience this evening.
Oh, thanks, Rob. It's a real privilege, man. Happy to be here and thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you. All right, let's get started then. So Garrett, why don't you start off by telling us your story and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm an accidental entrepreneur. Never thought I would, be living the life of an entrepreneur, but I went to college and went and got a corporate job like all of us did, or many of us did anyway. And after about a decade, I literally woke up one morning and I was like, I hate this. And that was, my journey. A lot of people loved their jobs. I just didn't like it. And that was all I knew. I didn't like it. And I needed to do something on my own. I had no idea what that would be. So at the time I was in, kind of like, my just past mid 20s, 27, had a 401k with like 15 grand in it, cashed that in, felt like I was rich. And there were two things. I had an aquatics background, or I have an aquatics background. So I decided, all right, I'm going to teach swimming lessons. So I spun up a swim school in the county, and wrote a little curriculum and started teaching kids how to swim. That turned into a little water safety program that I sold to school districts. And then that was not enough money to live on. So another thing I loved was photography, even though I never owned a camera. I loved photography. So I bought a camera and started taking photos of everything, everywhere, all the time.
Nice.
And that ended up taking photos of people. Long story short, the photography thing took off. It took off pretty well. And so I ended up through lots of, trial and error in education, shooting professionally. And I did that for 10 years. And about 8 years into that, at that point, had shot 350 weddings, had a team of 7 people. The inflection point of the digital media era showed up, where all cameras became digital, and film died overnight. All the film labs shut down. And so suddenly we became the lab and the studio. So that was a conundrum. I went and found somebody to help us solve that problem. We created a digital lab for our studio. I forecasted that probably was going to be an epidemic in the world for all photographers. So 2 years later, launched world's first digital media photography lab that was based using the internet.
Nice.
And that led me on a journey to scaling that business worldwide, serving 35 countries, over 500 employees, building a sister company to support the effort to be vertical, and which then led me up to 2 years ago, deciding for my next tour of duty, what did I fall in love with over those years? And that was how to scale business in a way that brings wellness to the people in the business, but also supports scale and growth for the business too. And that was the launch of Clarity Ops, which we've talked about. And here we are. I'm talking with you on your podcast. Awesome. And, onward and upward.
Excellent. So Garrett, I want to take you back to, and a lot of people can attest to this, and I've had many conversations with people, I'm sure you have as well. People get to a point where they feel stuck, right? And they don't know, they struggle in terms of, how to handle that feeling stuck, and, getting out of that moment where, you're in that 9 to 5, you don't love it, but
Mm.
you're kind of paralyzed to do anything else. What would you tell people, in terms of advice? How do you get out of that struggle, and how do you get out of that? How do you make the first move while you're feeling stuck?
Yeah. For clarity, Rob, is the persona we're talking about here an employee of a business, or is the persona a business owner that is stuck?
I would say an employee of a
An
business.
employee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's good. Well, here's my thought. I'm not sure everybody is destined to be a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is a tough run.
Yes.
Business is freaking tough.
Yes.
And so I'd say, number one, if you're thinking about that, count the cost and do a little bit of soul searching to make sure you're actually cut out to do it, because it's not for the faint of heart.
Yes.
And then I would say, if you go through that journey and you determine, yes, I am cut out for this and I'm going to go, then go and give it all your might. That said, if you determine, oh, wait, I actually think I'm not cut out for it. Perhaps I'm just working for the wrong company because they don't value me, or they don't value people, or I disagree with how they approach business. Then figure out what you do value and find a company that values the same things you value.
Yes. Excellent.
Those would be my thoughts.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks, Garrett.
Yeah.
So you and I talked about this before, and you mentioned that 9 out of 10 businesses fail. Now, in your experience, what are the primary reasons behind the staggering statistic?
Yeah. So within the first year, the stats say typically it's bad product market fit alignment, meaning the business owners, they didn't understand their target market, and they didn't understand what the target market wanted.
That's right.
They made assumptions, and then they, put a bunch of time, money, and resources into that, and it fails. That's usually within the first year. For those that make it past the first year, there are two reasons. Number one is finance. They just run out of money. Or number two, they got their priorities mixed up, which is very common for most of us. We go after, when I say we, I'm talking about fellow entrepreneurs, we go after the revenue first.
Yes.
Selling our value prop, selling our product, selling our service, and we negate and neglect the infrastructure that supports the delivery of that product or service, which makes raving fans and customers. And usually it's too late. And by the time they figure out, oh, shoot, we didn't plan for quality and turnaround time and satisfying the end user, now so many people hate us, there's no recovery. So once they get past that first year or two, then it's either, miscalculation on finances or infrastructure. Those tend to be the two. And where I bring focus is the infrastructure side. I assume you have product market fit. I assume that you have your finances in order, but you either became, your internal infrastructure became legacy and you didn't maintain it, or you never built it and you're in trouble and you need it to be transformed so you can scale.
So would you say that you need to put that infrastructure first before going out and, getting your customers, acquiring your customers, or you kind of do it in parallel as you're starting off? How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, I would recommend in tandem, in parallel, because I think you can afford it. You can afford it. Because I do think, speed to market is critical, especially in a competitive environment. But in terms of allocation of resources, I would prioritize maybe just, I hate using this term a bit because it's not measurable, but make sure you can deliver whatever it is you're selling according to your quality metrics and according to your promised turnaround time before you sell. Whatever that means to you, get those right. ahead first.
I love that.
That would be, my recommendation. And then, yeah.
And it's great you say that, Garrett, because I see a lot of businesses struggle these days where, and I don't even think they're struggling, but they overpromise customers a lot of things and they're not delivering it in time. And it's not like they even care because they've grown to a certain size and they don't really care about that customer service anymore.
It's true. I've seen that a lot. That's like, I appreciate your thought, Rob. Like as a consumer, like we experience that as consumers.
That's right. Yes.
And it drives me batty.
Yeah.
And then especially when you're like, and they don't even care. They don't even care. And I am fascinated by that there are a fair amount of well-to-do, profitable, successful businesses that have the right business model that will withstand bad customer service and not caring about the end user, which is fascinating to me,
That's right.
But they're out there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a recipe for success though.
No, I'm just comparing it to, the times where we grew up, and that was a big no-no because everything is dependent to your customers. But now, there's so much demand for certain things that people don't even care about the quality or the service anymore, right?
Yeah, man.
People are consuming at a, at a very high level, certain things at least.
Yeah. and I think the other side to that, dude, is we are probably don't have enough time on our hands to track those businesses and to find out they actually end up failing over time.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't think it's sustainable to treat customers that way. Do you?
I've seen that, Garrett, with certain organizations that are kind of like a monopoly, especially here in Canada.
Okay.
I see this in our telecom, in the telecom industry, where we have like two major players, and it is a monopoly, and they've taken over, and they don't really care because you're either bouncing from one of them to the other, and if one provides you with poor service, you go to the other one. Like, how many times can you go back and forth before you just throw your hands in the air and say, you need the service, and they don't really care whether they're providing you with a 10 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10.
Fair enough, man. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. So Garrett, you talked about, having to build tools over the past 25 years that support the operational infrastructure. Can you share more about these tools and the specific problems they solve for businesses?
Yes, I would be happy to. So I view the problems in businesses pertaining to kind of three main buckets: people, process, and performance. And within each of those, there are what I call rebar, things that contain people in a way that they will be well and healthy and contribute to the business in planned for ways. So for like an example of the people bucket are things like employment handbooks. Such a basic thing, but most businesses don't have them. And the reason why that is so important is it manages expectations of your people that you spend money on to work for you. And so it makes sense for an employer to invest in that because they want the people they hire to stay. But it is one of the primary reasons that people leave so quickly. Stats are there. Deloitte has Gallup bunch of studies on why people leave. Mismanaged expectations. They don't know, the business can't even tell them when they should get holiday, when they should get vacation pay, and how that's managed. So one framework I've built, one tool, is a template employee guideline. It's 57 pages, fully exhaustive. When you hire us, you get it out of the gate and you can form fit it, but you don't have to spend the 10,000 hours my teams did to build it and make it really uh, complete. Another component there in terms of people is core values, sort of core value playbook. What do you, as a business, what do you believe? And how do those belief systems determine how you make decisions? And then how do those decisions convert into your output for the business? For people, another thing under management is leadership agreements. So these are just a few under the people bucket. I think we have 18 under the people category. And my idea is, I have found, unless you really value these things, which I did because I'm allergic to chaos.
Yes.
Most business owners don't invest the money and the resources to build these things, so they just exist without them, which produces the disorder and chaos. So my goal is to take them and say, hey, these are already templatized for you. They're already built. They work really well. All you have to do is plug them in, pre-built. So that's people. Process is, you plan for the people, and then you build process for those people, instructions, guidelines, so they can execute with high quality. Anytime you give instructions to people, and this is my opinion, I really believe it, people want to be instructed.
Yes.
They want guidelines. They want to be in the know.
100%.
And so you really bless your people, when you give them instructions. So process is basically instructions on how to do stuff. So we have an entire framework called MAPS, Maintaining Alliance with Priorities and Strategies. And it is a way that you can use our templates to literally roll out workflows and SOP instantaneously in a way that scales. So real easy to follow framework. You can be any lay in any business, and you'll build it very quickly. And again, these are just a way to support people and help them do what they do. Inside of that also is a thing called a decision-making matrix. I'm sure you and I would agree, although we haven't talked about it, that instructions and guidelines will vary in direct proportion to your role. And so, like Jeff Bezos talks about, if you're in C-suite and you're, director status or the very top, you're probably paid very well to make 2 or 3 really big decisions every year.
Yes.
That role, probably a fail for a founder or CEO to say, here's instructions on how to think. Right? That's probably a fail.
Yes.
However, on the flip side, when you get down to the bottom of the org chart in the Genba, where you have, technicians, it would be a fail to give them a crazy amount of freedom and autonomy to be doing, executable activities that are redundant at that level and need to be the same recipe driven every single day for all of the output. That's a scenario where you don't want autonomy.
That's right.
So this is another little framework we provide so that business owners can see the correlation between load balancing, how you deploy decision-making, and where you should probably give freedom and where you should not to control the business.
Yes.
One of the biggest lies that were ever told to me, I think, I call it the big lie, that is hire great people and set them free. That, I swear to you, Rob, that almost tanked my business one time because I didn't understand this, the truth of it.
Yeah.
So anyways, you got people, process, and then performance. So once you cared for the people by planning for them, managing their expectations, you build process, then you have frameworks for how to manage the performance of that people, and how to measure the performance and how to hold accountable those people within that performance using governance and frameworks. And I'll just final comment on that is the reason I think that brings so much value to a business is because you get away from managers pointing fingers at people.
Yes. Instead,
you point fingers at the frameworks and at the pre-planned, this is what was expected. And then both parties, the person being measured and the manager, get to look at that rather than pointing a finger at somebody. It's a real piece of magic that works really well.
I love it. I love this concept. And honestly, wherever I start, it's always about, having the tools, the techniques, and the tools you talked about. One of the key things I always say is have expectations when you start. And there's a huge lack of that. The employee handbook, how many out of date handbooks, even if they exist, have we
If they
seen
exist, right?
that are not even reviewed on a regular basis? So if I start day one, okay, here you go, read this. 5 years later, how am I supposed to know what's in there, right?
Right, man.
And you're right. You're absolutely right about processes. People need instructions. You're the person with the vision and directing this organization in this path. How are they supposed to know where they're supposed to go? And, if you haven't even talked about it or showed them that vision. And I love the performance thing is something I think a lot of people struggle with. I've had many conversations, even with managers that they don't know where to start. There's no KPIs, there's no scorecards, there's no, performance improvement plans in place. Where do I start?
Right.
And we call it difficult conversations. Well, of course it's difficult because there's nothing in place for you
There's
to talk about,
nothing.
right? So I love what you're doing, Garrett.
Oh, Rob, thanks, man. It sounds like we're both on the same page.
100%.
And by the way, this stuff I found typically has to come from the top. And when it doesn't come from the top, who pays the price is everybody.
Yes.
Like even the manager is at the mercy of the C-suite or the founding leaders that set up these expectations or lack thereof. And so, like, to your point, if a manager isn't given KPIs, if a manager isn't given authority to build, or they didn't inherit benchmarks for how long things should take and when they should be done, they still have to manage, but they manage without any foundation for expectations.
That's right.
The best they can do is say, you didn't do it right, to which the employee says, what didn't I do right? Well, it's just not what we wanted. What didn't you want? Because you never told me.
That's right. That's right.
Right? This is fascinating stuff.
Absolutely. And I had recently, employees tell me, okay, where's the process and procedures of this? So I can look at it to make sure I'm within the confine of the process and I'm just not doing something offside.
Yep.
Where it's going to get me in trouble. So I think a system is critical to have in place. Those instructions and those processes, those expectations, all the stuff that you talked about are essential to a business, right? Especially if you're an entrepreneur and starting up, and you can't do everything yourself, right? And this is, I think, where you bring a lot of value to entrepreneurs, business owners, because again, you're not supposed to be the subject matter expert in everything. That's where you delegate, right?
That's right, man. Yeah, that's right. I'd love to just riff on that for a second too. Going back to blueprinting infrastructure and this idea of managers inheriting bad practices or lack thereof. Years ago, chief sinner, by the way, I having bought the lie that hire great people and then set them free, what I realized is I was inappropriately and incorrectly expecting managers to be superheroes. And hire smart people, they're really great. But then I would expect them to not only manage and maintain their people, but also drive strategy, also be a project manager, and also be a process builder. And it took me a while, but I realized I was shooting the business, myself, and our leaders in the feet. And so we came up with a thing called Quad Core Management Framework, which gives leaders, C-suite owners, permission to load balance all of these roles and responsibilities that they typically dump onto one person. They expect them to be all of these things in one person, and it's impossible. It's impossible. So this framework allows them to articulate who does what by design, so that you get the power of focus, then get your strength back, and onward and upward. So I thought it was it.
No, that's awesome. And I think, again, the roles and responsibilities is something that a lot of people haven't even seen properly. So All right, Garrett. I want to talk to you about, again, going back to one of the things we talked about in our conversation was many businesses tend to focus heavily on sales and revenue. In your opinion, what should businesses be focusing on to achieve sustainable success?
So goes without saying, got to have revenue, right?
Yes.
And got to have a pipeline of leads to drive that revenue. But businesses need rails. They need rails. We talk about, especially in like manufacturing, you have supply chain where you're hyper dependent on all of your third-party vendors that are going to provide you with all the stuff you need to assemble and then, right? Well, inside of a business, you have value chains, which means you have all of these bespoke departments, HR, finance, marketing, sales, production, IT, customer success, right? All of these. And what the future of business, if they're smart, will invest in is understanding that these are all interdependent functions. They need desperately one another to sustain. The trap we both see is businesses don't pay attention in this way and they end up building silos.
Yes.
And you have functions that are act as if that they're their own business and have no need or dependency on the other. And that's when you start falling into problems, right?
Yes.
And so I would say break down the silos, fundamentally understand all the functions need desperately each other, and then build a internal supply chain. And so I don't want to mix and mingle. I don't want to mess up the vernacular there, but instead of thinking as your outside third-party vendors supply chain, consider your upriver HR department part of your critical supply chain, and your IT, all of these functions as a chain of events that need to occur in interdependence for the perfect dream outcome for your business. And I know it probably sounds a little, 50,000 feet, like, what does that mean? But with the right tools and frameworks and techniques, it assembles together really nicely and quickly.
That's
as
right.
a solution. Yeah.
So you talked about silos, and I've been in an organization where the silos exist. In your opinion, how does an organization, or how do the leaders of the organization go about to, like you said, breaking down those silos and integrating everyone together?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, Rob. What I've seen is the mileage varies depending on the organization and how Loctite those silos have become and for how long.
Yeah.
And the longer they're in silo, the more culture debt you have. So I'd say always the very first step is acknowledging at the top that you have a problem, and then getting your leaders to acknowledge that they have a problem.
Yes.
If you could do that, I think 80% of your problems are solved when it comes to breaking down silos. But I found those two are the biggest ones, is founder, CEO, C-suite, and then mid to upper tier management, all going, we have a problem and the problem is us.
Yeah.
Because it's the ego.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody likes to admit that they failed or they're doing it wrong,
Yeah, that's the biggest problem, I think. And, you all have to be on the same page at that level, and nobody wants to take responsibility, unfortunately. And, that's where the finger pointing happens and
right.
everything goes sideways.
Yeah.
But that's,
but I think that for those that are willing, a mentor of mine who was my the chair of my board for 5 years, he said the best thing to me. He said, one of the things that helped him transform as a leader and his businesses was he made it a point anytime he perceived there was a problem, he would say, start with me. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the problem. Man, that was some of the best advice I ever received. And for any of us leaders out there, if we can do that, I think great things happen when you're willing to face it honestly.
Absolutely. You're always accountable for your people.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Track that.
Yeah. Amazing. So Garrett, you talked about, or you mentioned the phrase, it's okay to operate in chaos is actually not okay. And what is a better approach for businesses to take, and how can they move away from the chaotic operations?
Yeah. What I meant by that, Rob, was because chaos is so normal.
Yes.
Right? It's
Yeah.
so normal. It is like the law of entropy. Everything naturally wants to go from order to chaos.
Yes.
And so I think the default status quo headspace for business owners is, well, this is just normal, and so we have to learn to live with it.
Yes.
And I want to change that narrative. I want to change that conversation and say, actually, you don't have to.
Yes.
You don't have to. And as a matter of fact, maybe just consider the damage you're doing to your business and to your people when you accept it as okay. So going back to first realizing you have a problem and being woman enough, man enough, responsible enough to say, no, we're not going to stand for it.
Yeah.
And then from there, pursue a plan to break free.
Yes.
Pursue a plan to break free. Now, it's not lost on me how difficult that road is. That's why most businesses don't pursue it. Which is why by the way, Rob, when we met prior to this podcast, you challenged me with, what my mission was.
Yes.
And I really appreciated that, man. And I have, although I've not finished it, I am making really great headway.
Okay. Because I was going to ask you during.
Were you?
Yes. We'll be going there soon.
Okay. Yeah. But going, long way around to get to the answer is acknowledge that you do want to break free, pursue a plan to break free.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find the right plan, I believe that plan should be one that is easy to implement,
Yes.
that is fast to implement, and can be operated by any level in your organization with ease and in perpetuity.
That's right.
And that, that's my recommendation.
Amazing. And the other thing I want to add to that is, when we normalize chaos, what you're also normalizing is burnout, stress, mental health, and
Yes.
all of this stuff comes with the chaos, because not a lot of people can handle that kind of situation.
No, man.
On a regular basis.
Yeah.
It's not.
I was just reading a study by Deloitte yesterday, and they said that 60% of all employees they have surveyed said that their job is high stress, and they take that high stress with them home.
Yes.
So it's like you're paying to ruin your business. You're paying your people to be stressed out, and you're paying them to have a worse life.
Yes.
At home, in their personal life. Like, there's something wrong with that equation.
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
And I say that from a guy that actually was that guy for a decade, because I didn't know any better.
That's right. I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Yeah.
It has a huge trickle down effect, and it's not only the business pays for it, you pay for it, your family pays for it, your kids pay for it.
Yeah.
It's not a good place to be, that's for sure.
No, man. I'm with you. I'm with you, man.
Awesome. So let's talk about hiring now. And I know you've talked about hiring 500 plus people in your organizations. Now, Garrett, in terms of qualities and characteristics, what do you look for in order to, ensure you have the right candidate for your organization?
Yeah, it's great. So I'm going to answer this in an interesting way, or I hope, because we appreciate, if we look at the org chart, the vertical and the horizontal, depending on the size of your org, there could be 100 or 500 different roles.
Right.
And so for me, it's all about context. First and foremost, understanding, and this is founder C-suite, understanding all of the different bespoke roles in your org, what their key focus areas are, and what their activities are, and how those all lead up to your dream outcome for the business. Because it's one big engine with a bunch of engine parts. That's what we're talking about here, yes. Right? And so you got to be clear about those, and then the skills necessary for each of those roles to operate with excellence and at peak performance, right? And then once you have those, you're golden. Now, when the process is given to the functions and departments who need to hire by HR, they fill out their form. There's already a prerequisite to have a job description that is up to date in place. And that job description actually is the recipe to the recruit team to know exactly what to look for.
That's right.
What they're going to be focused on, what they're going to be doing, what skills they need to possess. Then there's no questions now. It's all context. You just go to the recipe book, which is the job description, and it's all right there. All right. And then the only thing I would add once you have those things is test before you hire. Test before you hire, because us humans are really good at accidentally being deceptive about our capabilities. Made that mistake 100 times. Being joyously excited about feeling like for whatever role we were hiring for, we found the right perfect person, and they just sold us, and we were in love with them, and they're in love with us, all to find out they actually embellished, weren't actually as much of an SME in these areas as their resume said they were. They talked really well, but their execution didn't meet their talk. So I think that testing component is critical. There's some really great apps out there like Test Dome. You can customize tests for skills that you want to validate. And, all things considered, fairly inexpensive. And it's such a great truth teller,
Yeah, I think we've all been burned by that, and including myself. And you talk about that, getting too excited, and you think you found the right person until they weren't. But I want to ask you this: when you talked about testing them, there's only so much test that you can deploy on a person. And let's say you're hiring a new grad out of school, right? For a new grad position or co-op position or whatever it may be. What kind of tests are you deploying? Because they don't have the skills, necessary for that job because they just got out of school. So what are you testing there, Garrett?
Yeah. So the formula I've built in the past is, again, going back to context. So the test should match the role. And the test within that role should match the skill sets. And then we use a 60-minute benchmark. No testing beyond 60 minutes. We found anything beyond that, people go like, dude, this isn't worth it. And they roll. So like, let's say you're bringing in somebody on the a customer service agent, and you look at the skills there, and they need to be able to write a coherent paragraph.
Yeah.
They need to have comprehensive listening skills, where you read a paragraph, and then you need to summarize it. So here's some real basic levels of test at that level, where you can say, all right, I want you to read these 3 paragraphs, that those 3 paragraphs go away, and now you have to summarize what you just read. Really simple, but it challenges critical thinking skills. It challenges the ability to articulate in a coherent paragraph your thoughts based on something you just read. And then you do some other things like, how would you deal with a customer that treated you this way? So you do some scenario circumstantial questions. And so if you take that formula and you apply it to all levels of the org, you get wonderful ROI without a whole lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah. Interesting.
What do you think?
I'm gonna apply that. So again, I have mixed feelings about this, because I know there's a lot of organizations that do these
Personality
tests and all sorts of tests that they have. To be honest with you, I did a test once, and I don't think the results really matched who I was.
Okay.
But they took it as in the way they saw it was purely just on that, without getting to know me.
Oh, right.
And I'm like, if you want a test to dictate, if you think you're gonna judge me based on a test, you can go ahead, because I don't want to work for that organization, right?
Okay.
And this is what I mean, that certain tests don't necessarily give you a true answer or a true output of who that person is, because I can go through the test and go through the questions so fast because I'm tired, I'm not focused, and the outcome isn't going to be really me.
Got it. Robert, are you referring to the personality tests? Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're not talking about, like, if we were going to hire you for an engineer, and your core responsibility was to write senior PHP code, and you couldn't pass that test.
Correct.
We're not talking about that.
Yeah, that's different. So I have, I hire people for CAD, and what I do is, we give you a sample, and you draw this CAD for me to see what level. If you're telling me you're a level 10, and your CAD skills show level 1, you weren't being too honest. So there, I don't look for your CAD skills necessarily. I'm looking more of your character.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
You can see both now.
Yeah.
You can show me your CAD skills, but you're also showing me your integrity.
Truth.
Right?
Truth, man. Okay, so we're united then. I actually, I'm with you on the personality tests. I'm personally not a fan.
Yeah.
Because I just don't know how you could ever test for somebody's personality type through a test like that.
Yes.
So we've never done that, but that's always been my choice. We've always just stuck with the skills-based test to validate you actually could do your job the moment you show up.
That's right.
Skill-wise. But what we do is, and I really believe in this, is we front load pre-hire our values. And so that way we go, listen, we believe in measuring performance, and here's why. It's not to micromanage you. It's to make sure we all have a job.
Exactly.
Or we don't tolerate gossip. We don't tolerate lying because we think it's destructive. So are you good with these things? So that we do. But the personality stuff, we don't. Good.
Yeah, I've got my own set of questions, which is not typical of your normal, interview questions. And, I throw people off when I ask these questions. But I'm constantly testing for your character, because to me, when you're at a lower level and you're coming in, I can always train you to be skillful.
Yeah.
But you cannot train somebody's character. If they're, if they've got agendas and they'll be that bad apple in the group, I don't care how much experience and knowledge you have. I will not tolerate that, because the minute you put them in and your entire team, that whole engagement, the environment is ruined because of one person, and all you're counting on is their experience.
Yeah.
There's so many people out there that you can train to gain that knowledge and experience, right?
Well put. I agree with you 100%, Rob.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So Garrett, here's the interesting part we've come to. So I wanted to ask you, and feel free to tell me where you're at with this. You don't have to take a deep dive at it. So what is your purpose, and how has it shaped your approach to business and leadership over the years?
Yes. So I told you, I'm not ashamed to say this on your podcast for everybody that's listening, because I really did appreciate when we met. You were like, "What's your purpose, man?" And it caught me off guard. I've thought through a lot of things regarding business. That one, of all things, I really hadn't. So thank you, by the way, Rob.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I haven't taken it lightly, which is why I'm not prepared to say I've arrived. But here's some. I'm going to actually just read straight from my journal.
Good.
Okay.
Beautiful.
To create a better quality of life for business owners and their employees as they succeed together. If you're struggling with your health, you're not truly alive and free as a human. And when I say health, I'm referring to the health of the business. If a business produces high stress and low happiness, I just can't imagine anything good coming out of that. I've lived it.
Love it.
To create products, and this goes to my fast solutions, create products that are easy to use, fast to implement, and can be used repeatedly at scale to offer high quality of business health to more people. So that's where I've arrived so far.
Amazing. Awesome.
And I maybe just to put a cherry on top, I guess I already said this earlier, but I know for a fact why businesses don't build these rails, because it's time consuming and it's complex.
Yes. Yeah.
It really is. Do we talk about this? Do you listen to Guy Raz's podcast, How He Built This?
No.
No. Yeah. Okay. It's a great podcast. It's just all the stories of entrepreneurs you and I know about, and most of us know about. Recently on the podcast was the story of Banana Republic, the store, husband and wife team. And they said it, they said it in their podcast. We just skyrocketed in growth at 7 years, and suddenly we lost quality and we lost control of our deliverables. We were always late. And why? We just never had the time, and we didn't know how to do it. Right? Thrive Market, TaskRabbit, what's the cookie? You could go on and on. It's the same story. And so I was allergic to it. So I like had to build these solutions. And so I'm really excited. I believe that if a business realizes they don't want to live that way, but I also know they don't have time and it's very complex, well, I want to be able to change the narrative and change the landscape to help them get it done fast in a way that really works. You don't have to invent anything. You just plug it in and go. And that is my mission.
I love it. Amazing. Keep going. You're doing a good job. And again, happy to help you along the way. And I'm glad that you're here today to spread that message to the rest of the folks out there.
Oh, thank you, Rob.
My pleasure.
And right back at you, man.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Here to support you.
Thank you very much. We've almost reached the end of our podcast, but before we end this, I've come to the part of my podcast which I call rapid fire questions. So I'm going to be throwing some questions at you, and the first thing that comes to mind, just say it out loud.
Okay, man.
Ready for this?
Let's go. Let's do it.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
so much. Sorry, dude.
No worries.
You can only manage what you measure.
Yeah.
I had to go through my Rolodex.
Yeah, no worries. What's the biggest gap in leadership today?
Not planning.
How do we fix it?
You get razor sharp clear about what the business needs, how that affects what you need as you lead your teams. And then you convert that clarity into writing and give it to your people and make sure they understand it.
Awesome. What's the most difficult emotion to control as a leader?
Frustration.
Okay. What's the one word that describes Garrett best? Another curveball at you.
Militant.
Oh, nice. I wouldn't have seen that coming. And Garrett, lastly, where can people find you?
Oh, thanks, Rob. They can find me on LinkedIn. Garrett Delph is my handle. And of course, at clarityops.co.
Awesome. Amazing. Again, I wanted to thank you so much for being with me today and sharing your knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories on the RK Leadership Podcast. For those out there, if you've got any questions for Garrett, drop in the comments below, or you know where to find them, as his information will be shared on at the bottom of this podcast. And again, thank you for everyone for tuning in. And if you like what you see, follow, subscribe for more. And again, we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks again, Garrett. And we'll talk.
Thank you so much, Rob.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.